Hello, and welcome to Memory Card, the history of video games, where we take a chronological view at gaming history. This is not just a look at video games in general, but a look at how they were made and who made them, and also we cover other historical events in gaming history and any influential people as well. Now, I have been absent from doing memory card content for a while now. I think over a year. And I wanted to start up again. I think I have figured out a kind of system to juggle all of the different responsibilities I have because, to be honest, memory card and content creation is last on the priority for me. I have so much other things that I do that are just higher up, but I think I have found room for where content creation can go. And the other thing that kind of happened was I got really tired of Adobe, and the struggle was trying to find a new platform, or not platform, but new software to really be able to edit and stuff like that. So I found DaVinci Resolve is what I recommend as an alternative to Premiere, which is what I used to edit everything. Of course, this does mean I'll probably have to change some things about the video portion of this. The other thing too was is I got a new computer. Just a lot of things happening in life to where it just kept getting pushed back and put like memory card just kept getting pushed down, further down and further down. But I think I'm at a point now where I can have some time for it. And so basically, what I'll do is not really have like a strict schedule, um, but I'll try to have these come out every week or so, if possible. I'm currently working on the backlog of podcast episodes of Memory Card. I have two that I need to record, including this very one that you're listening to. And then I'll start working on the video and podcast kind of side to side like I used to be, that was doing before. Um, and so that was kind of the explanation for the absence for over a year now. And I always said I didn't want to give up on it. I always said that on like Blue Sky and Threads when I was asked about it. I never wanted to give up on it. It was a passion project that I came up with in 2024, and I wanted to continue it. Or not 2024, 2023. Um, because there's so many cool stories that are often not told, um, and this was a way to tell them, and this was a way for me to explore the history of video games, a hobby that is been in my life forever. So, yeah, I wanted to continue this, and but kind of the real nature of it is it's last on the priority, and that's kind of just the crux of it. Unless it just becomes my main source of income, it's always going to be last. Unless it becomes something big, it's always going to be last. So that's just the reality of it for anyone that's kind of passionate about this. I know there's a few people out there that have subscribed to my YouTube channel, and there it seems to be liked so far, and so I didn't want to give up on it. I wanted to still provide that, and hopefully those folks are still craving this sort of content. But regardless, I'm going to continue it. And so today, now that that's kind of all out of the way, today we're going to be talking about Plato games. Not Play-Doh, the clay stuff. It's PLATO games. Um, And so this kind of starts back in the late 1950s, in the beginnings of the Cold War. In Illinois, Control Systems Laboratory had been working on various classified projects, but some of the research included computing. And three scientists in the laboratory began to speculate how computing could be used in all fields and levels of education. So this kind of continues how a lot of early video games were used for the kind of more educational purposes. Excuse me. Um, this group was made up of Don Bitzer, an ECE professor and director of PLATO, which is what we're talking about today, Dan Albert, a physics professor and CSL head, and Chalmers Sherwin, a physicist. So Bitzer launched Plato in 1960, and while scientific curiosity was one of the larger reasons for the launch of a new computer system, he also wanted to focus on education inequality. So one of the main things he said was, and I quote, I'd been reading projections that said that 50% of the students coming out of our high schools were functionally illiterate, Bitzer said in a 1997 interview. Sherwin wasn't afraid to ask big questions. One day he asked, why can't we use computers for education? So Bitzer hooked a television tube to the ILLIAC1 mainframe. I don't know if it's pronounced like iliac or if it's just like an acronym. But regardless, that mainframe on campus and information displayed on the screen. This served as the introduction for many students to computer learning, which for my generation and a lot of kids like since the 90s, like computer learning has been the norm. So just kind of imagine back then where it quite wasn't the norm. So in 1962, the Daily Illini, which is, I believe, the University of Illinois' student newspaper, wrote that the system had administered lessons about anything from French verb endings to mathematics. The article uses Little Jimmy to tell the readers how this fancy new system works. So, Little Jimmy sits down at the screen for his lesson and flips the pages, typing on a keyboard if the system prompts him with a question. When he submits his answer, a bell rings. If he's correct, he can move on, but if it's wrong, he'll have to keep answering until he gets it right. He can ask for help, of course, and Plato will give more detail. He can flip back and forth throughout the lesson. Oh, sorry, excuse me. I have like indigestion. Plato's first test was at Leal Elementary School in Urbana, and by the 1970s, the school had an interesting twist attached to computer learning for its students. So quote at the game at the game at the grade school, an M&M's dispenser was hooked up to give the students candy when they completed lessons. And the system proved wildly popular, with students saving the M&Ms as trophies of their success. A 2014 story on the program read, which is crazy to imagine. Like, if you had the most M&Ms, that meant you were the best at this. Is kind of how I imagine that. You were the coolest kid in school. So Plato was expensive to run within the Loomis laboratory, and Bitzer devised an easier way for it to run using plasma screens. So with this change, Plato grew at a rapid pace. I have no idea what's going on. I cannot read my script at all, but thanks for sticking with me. The university was able to connect Plato to other university buildings, the local Parkland College, and elementary schools in the area. I'm going to take a nice sip of some water. It's important to drink water. Always important to be hydrated. I don't know why I'm giving a lesson here. Anyway, in 1968, the Illinois Board of Education invested over $1 million to the project after both the National Science Foundation and the Department of Defense backed it. By 1972, PLATO could be accessed by 1,000 users at once. The Illinois Board of Higher Education praised PLATO while announcing they would not open any more public senior colleges in the state. Quote, the university should develop plans for expanding the PLATO experimental program and for a possible eventual statewide PLATO teaching network, the board recommended. This was in a 1971 Daily Illini article. Man, I had pizza and it is not sitting well with me. But if you're new to the podcast, because this is a big gap, this is a pretty casual, laid-back podcast, so I'm going to interject with random things here and there. PLATO continued to evolve using more complex programming languages, allowing for graphical, higher quality teaching. So PLATO is uniquely noticeable by its monochrome display, using in a black and orange kind of look. So it's kind of like a Halloween kind of look. And allowed for downloadable character sets to display graphics. So this was all displayed in a 512 by 512 display. Because of how the system was set up, students and coursework authors created their own programs for the device, such as Notes, which was similar to email and a newsgroup system that was connected to an online community. One of the first networked multiplayer games in history was created on PLATO called Empire, which was themed after Star Trek. So Star Trek again pops up in early video game history. That really just speaks to the level of the kind of societal impact that Star Trek had, because Star Trek continuously shows up in early video game history, and again here, and probably more in more future episodes, let's be honest. But we will get to that specific game in a future episode, so we're not even going to touch it yet. So there was also an app called Talkomatic, which was a chat room. So this thing was basically like the... Oh, sorry. We'll talk about the Star Trek game later in this episode, not a future episode. I completely read that wrong. But as I was saying, like, this thing was like the Stone Age modern internet in a way. Like, it had email, it had online communities, it had chat rooms, games. Like, it's kind of crazy from... because I'm Gen Z, older Gen Z. And it's wild to me to think that this kind of technology was available back then. It doesn't quite compute in my mind. And so I find it really fascinating. So David Woolley, who was a former student of Bitzer, he wrote a memoir called PLATO, The Emergence of Online Community. And he said people would hang out in a channel and chat or flirt with whoever dropped by. So in Gen Z video game terms, like, this was like the first VR chat. And granted, much smaller users, amount of users here. But I can imagine, like, if VR chat was around back then, that's kind of like what this would be. So PLATO was also used in the Federal Aviation Administration to help train personnel on air traffic control, and was installed in an FAA facility in Oklahoma City. It was used for training well into the 2000s. They used this thing all the way into the 2000s. So by 1985, PLATO had grown so large it was used in over 100 campuses, and even the Soviet Union wanted a piece of the pie. So, as PLATO the system, that's kind of where the history ends. There's not much that goes beyond what we talked about. Obviously, other things came out like Windows and Apple and all that stuff where they kind of took control over that kind of stuff. So we're going to talk about the games, and this is kind of what I was meaning earlier, which was we're going to talk about the Star Trek game first, um, because and not in another episode. So let's dive into the game called Empires. It's not technically Star Trek, but it's largely influenced by Star Trek. So the first game was dubbed Empire 1 and was written by Iowa State student John Delesk, I think that's how you pronounce that, in 1973. The first version of the game allowed a maximum of 8 players to play the game. Silas Warner helped Delesk by providing disk space, and after Empire 1 was erased to bring up its sequel Empire 2, Warner revived Empire 1 and dubbed it Conquest. So technically was known by 2 different names. Of course, I think there was a lot of games around this time named like Conquest and Empire, but specifically. So like Empire 2 was written in the later part of 1973. It had much more of an emphasis on tactics. At the tail end of 1973, Delesk created Empire 3 in just 36 hours. This version of the game can still be played on Cyber 1 PLATO systems. So I guess there's some Cyber 1 PLATO systems out there that you could still play this. And I mean, I would love to be able to do that. So this game received a lot of improvements and allowed players to be a rogue team rather than be affiliated with a faction. So I guess you could kind of not you could kind of just be your own team in a way, which is basically what I just said. So in 1976, the fourth installment was created by a team of Chuck Miller, Gary Fritz, John Delesk, and Jim Batten. This game was released in 1977 called Empire 4. The game also received a tournament version by Steve Peltz, which allowed annual tournaments between teams, with most being won by the Orion team. So I'm happy to make the argument here that this was the first instance of esports. Like, this is the earliest version of esports that I've found so far. And I need to look into the Orion team. Like this might be the first time like I actively look something up during recording of a podcast. And it doesn't look like there's much online about the team itself that I can find. So this would be what, 1977? Let's see if we can. I want to see if we can find something out about the team. I don't think so. No, it doesn't look like it. Let's look at the Wikipedia page. No, there's nothing about the team. Not that I can find. Well, I would love to go back and cover the Orion team. Sorry, I hit the mic there. But I would love to go and if there's anybody out there that knows about the team, I would love to go back and touch base on that aspect because I think that'd be a cool story too. So, according to the uses logs from the PLATO system, users spent a total of 300,000 hours playing Empire. That was huge back then, I imagine. Like, that, you made a successful game with that. So, the game was still available to play up to 2013, at least via cyber1.org, which, speaking of which, I was just saying I wanted to get my hands on. I don't know if that website is still up and running, though. Um, So if anyone is aware of Cyber One still being active, or if there's a similar emulator out there, or if something like RetroArch has something like that, I would be interested in that just to give it a shot. Um, but I believe like there was still like a dedicated player base in 2013 that was playing off of cyber1.org of Empire like matches and stuff like that. That's the most that I could see when I was researching this. So we kind of delved into the history. So what about the game itself? Like what how was it played? Um, so all control of the game had to be done by typing out commands since Plato terminals could not be operated by a mouse, which sounds very tedious from me, my perspective. So the commands of the game were rather complicated. You were using degree headings. So I'm going to attempt to use an example provided from the Wikipedia page. So the degree headings were 0 for right, 90 for up, 180 for left, 270 for down. And arrow keys could also be used. So that provided a little bit of relief from that. So the main goal of the game is like other Grand War strategy games to conquer the entire map, or in this case, the galaxy. For this map, it contained 25 planets and 4 different races. These races were the Federation, aka humans, I guess, Romulans, the Orions, and the Klingons. However, the Klingons were replaced by the Khazari because the original game authors were reportedly afraid of copyright infringement, which I don't think Paramount owned Star Trek back then. Maybe they did. I don't remember. Uh, Paramount doesn't play around with their copyright, so I wouldn't be too surprised about being afraid of the copyright stuff from them. Each team starts off with 3 planets in their home system. So each team starts in the corners of the map, kind of like a bigger version of Warlords, or in more current terms like Stellaris. If you ever played Stellaris, it's kind of like that, except you're kind of in the corners, not necessarily like you couldn't be like right next to each other. I play Stellaris a very specific way, so maybe it's not like the default way of doing that, but I digress. Each planet contains 50 armies at the start of the game, and neutral planets, not ruled by any team yet, had 25 AI armies. So surprisingly, the game could feature up to 30 players at once, with a max of 15 players per team. That's insane. That's like, I know it's not quite Battle Royale because it's not it's quite not the same as that, but like back then that's an undertaking to have 30 players at once. So each player pilots a starship, and before we go getting further, I'm sure that was a lot of fun though. Like if you ever watch videos and stuff like that of the old Halo like LAN parties where there was this huge party of people just playing Halo, like I imagine it was something like that with this, but it was just very like it would get intense. Like this is why I would love to know more about the Orion team, because like I want to know like how intense did the matches get. Anyway, so each player pilots a starship, and players engage in dogfights with each other. They can also beam up armies to their ship and beam them down to planets to take them over. For a game this old, it is surprising how complex it is. And honestly, I really do wish I could play it. It sounds like it would be a blast. Makes me wish that, because I was too young to recognize all this stuff when it was active, but I wish I was old enough to like get involved in this to be able to play it, because it sounds like a blast. On top of this, the races differ slightly. So Orion ships have the weakest weapons but are fast. Romulans have the strongest weapons but are the slowest. And the Federation and Kanzari are a little bit more balanced. Ships have the standard Star Trek weapons of phasers and photon torpedoes. So there's pretty good balancing here, I would say. Like, if you were kind of like a more newer player, I imagine you would do like Federation or Kazari. And then if you're a little bit more skilled in certain ways, you would do like Orion or Romulans. And I wonder if that's why Orion's won so much. I don't know if that was the team because of the race or if it was like the team name or something like that. Again, I would love to go back and really dive deep into that if there's anybody that has more information about that uh, section of history. So, although this might sound super action packed, it seems like the game could take a while to get going. Flying to an enemy system could take about 2 minutes, according to Wikipedia, of course. Bombing a planet could take up to 10 minutes, and a whole game could take days. So, it's a lot like Monopoly, but in Star Trek. So, but at least, hey, you don't have to clean up the mess. And you don't have to worry about your cat knocking over the pieces. Because 100% that's what my cat would do if we tried to play a Monopoly game in this house. He would absolutely knock over the pieces. Or mess up like the money. So there's a lot of technical aspects of the gameplay, but I don't think it's quite interesting enough to really go full in length with that. Plus, I have some other games I want to talk about as well. So I definitely recommend checking out the Wikipedia article and doing some research on it. It's super interesting stuff. So the next thing I wanted to talk about was the dungeon, or it's also called Petit 5. So the game was developed by Rusty Rutherford. I love that name, by the way. In 1975 for the University of Illinois Urbana Champaign. Champaign. I'm probably going to get some Illinois people that are like, "Wow, you butchered that," and we're gonna unsubscribe from everything you do from now on. Rutherford was playing Dungeons and Dragons, and he wanted to create a video game based off of it. Sounds easy enough. Ironically, there was another game in development for PLATO called D&D with the same idea. So while D&D was focused on creating a more multiplayer experience, Rutherford was focused on creating a single-player experience. So the game is called Petit 5 because Rutherford was a member of the Population and Energy group at the university. So each group is assigned program slots, and the group had already used the first 3 slots, and Rutherford coded his game in the 5th slot. Rutherford actually used Petit 4 for the game's manual. Petit 5 was actually deleted because the system administrators deemed the game was not appropriate for the resources. So they actually deleted the game. But Rutherford was able to restore it. Dude, imagine like the work you put in for a game and then it gets deleted because they deem it's just not worth the resources. Like, I don't know how data restoration was back then, but now it's like a heart attack at first because you're just like, oh my god, I emptied the recycle bin, and like you have a certain amount of time, right, to get a software that can restore that data before it's just gone. So I can imagine like the time crunch here. So the game is often in consideration for one of the first dungeon crawler games. So we're starting to see some dungeon crawlers pop up. It could also be argued to be one of the first roguelike games because there wasn't really the term roguelike wasn't a thing until recently. And that's because it had randomly generated monster encounters and treasures. So that's interesting. Like with new genres and new kind of like subgenres that form, you could go back and look and see what would actually fit that new subgenre. So gameplay wise, the game had 40 to 50 rooms to a single level, and the game could only store 20 players at a time, which is still a lot to me. So much like other dungeon crawlers, the player's goal is to kill monsters and collect treasure. Upon encountering a monster, the player can use several spells. Ooh, I need the water again. I know it's a very professional podcast. It's really not. It's a really casual podcast. So, when encountering a monster, the player has to choose where to fight, whether to fight, cast a spell, or run. And if the player doesn't decide quickly, the computer will simulate the fight with the player not being able to control it. So, kind of imagine in this situation a Dark Souls boss fight where if you don't make a decision quick enough, the computer just kind of decides for you, which would probably be better than how I was in Dark Souls because I suck at Dark Souls. I have tried many times. I'm just not good at it. So we're actually going to get into the D&D game, which is also called the Game of Dungeons. So while Rutherford was making Pettit 5, Gary Wisenhunt and Ray Wood were making D&D in 1974 at Southern Illinois University. The game was also based on Dungeons and Dragons, which first released in 1974. So D&D was written in the Tutor programming language, and after the initial release of the game, Dirk Pellet, who attended Iowa State University, and Flint Pellet, who attended the University of Illinois, helped update the game from 1976 to 1985. So D&D has a short history on its Wikipedia page, so let's jump into the gameplay aspects. Much like the tabletop version, players create a character and adventure through what is known as Wizenwood Dungeon, which is a play on Gary Wisenhunt and Ray Wood's last names. It's creative. The goal is to find the ultimate treasures, a grail and an orb. I just said, I was like, oh, that's creative, and then I completely butcher that next line in my script. Players navigate the dungeon like a maze, and the game is presented in an overhead view. So players have several choices in the game, including going back to previous levels of the dungeon and even leaving the dungeon altogether. This makes the game one of the first in history to have kind of that non-linear progression. Again, all these games I would just love to play. I just want to experience them at least once. And the sad thing is, the means of playing these kinds of games is probably gone for good unless somebody recreates it. Or you get your hands on the original hardware. So completions of levels garner new spells for the player, along with weapons and items. So there's kind of like an experience thing going on here, that RPG element. The game also features some of the first instances of bosses, such as a golden dragon. And I know there's a whole lore with golden dragons in Dungeons and Dragons as well, but I don't quite know that. And it may not have applied to when this game came out, so never mind. Anyway, so we're going to go into the last game in this episode, which is called Moria, which does sound familiar. It should for all my Lord of the Rings fans. So hold on for a second. So this is another Dungeons and Dragons inspired game. Moria is another game that was inspired by Dungeons and Dragons. and was created by Kevin Duncombe and Jim Batten in 1975. So, according to Wikipedia, Duncombe never played or never read J.R.R. Tolkien or played Dungeons and Dragons. Batten helped in making the game 3D as it uses a first person type display, and Pellet, who we mentioned earlier, suggested the name of Moria. So it really wasn't based on Lord of the Rings. And that may have been Pellet's kind of, may just been a big nerd who was like, we can't have another D&D clone that's just called D&D again. So what's the next nerdy thing that I can think of? Lord of the Rings, Moria. Call it Moria. So it's technically not the first Lord of the Rings game, but also you could argue, I guess it could be. So I guess it depends on your interpretation. So yeah, it's more so based on the other Plato game D&D. As for gameplay, there is not too much of a difference between D&D. Other than the Wikipedia page specifically mentions that up to 10 players can play the game at the same time. So I think that was less than what D&D could do. The game generates dungeons as well as, wow, my brain does not want to work today. It doesn't. So the game generates dungeons as opposed to pre-computing them. So again, it's kind of like a randomized experience each time. And that is pretty much to the extent that I will cover the Plato games. There are several other games that I couldn't really find too much info for. So I do want to mention those games in case other folks are interested in researching them. So there's Airfight, Avatar, Free Cell, Panther, Oblit, I think that's how you pronounce that, and Spasm. I did look up some basic facts about some of these games. So Airfight was a multiplayer flight simulator. Avatar was a RPG dungeon crawler like the other games we discussed. I guess that was a pretty popular genre back then. Free Cell was a solitaire card game. Panther was a multiplayer tank driving simulator that featured games like Team Deathmatch, which became immensely popular much later in games like Call of Duty and Halo. So that's kind of where Team Deathmatch really started, was Panther. Spasm, or Spasm, I guess there's a certain way you pronounce that, was a space flight simulator similar to, it was kind of a similar aspect with first-person shooter stuff, I guess. Oblit was another RPG dungeon crawler type game. So, I mean, this decade, this era of video games was just dungeon crawler to dungeon crawler, which, I mean, when you look at kind of like the games like Adventure and stuff like that, like that's all there was. There's just a lot. It was either space or dungeons is what it seems like. So I couldn't really find too much else on those games. But I highly suggest reading about all of these games, even the ones I dived more deep into, because there's so much cool stuff about these that I just can't fit in an episode. And I would love to potentially look at some aspects of these games in the future, maybe like in retroactive type episodes. That is kind of an idea that I've had if I start a Patreon going, you do special episodes and stuff. But for now, that'll do it for the Plato games. And we'll hit the outro. So, as always, I can't do this without sources, and for this one, I did mostly use Wikipedia, but that's because Plato is a very niche type of system, but honestly was amazing for its time. These games all sound like fun, and it's crazy to see how far roguelike dungeon crawlers have come since these early Plato games. I hope you learned something and enjoyed this episode. And next time, we will take a look at Computer Space, the first arcade video game that is the next on my backlog to get caught up on the podcast version. So look for that one sooner rather than later. So we'll talk about Computer Space. I did want to talk about the sources that I use. So I did use the Granger College of Engineering from the Illinois University of Illinois. Of course, Wikipedia, as mentioned. Medium, there was some articles, there was some stuff from medium.com that I used. And then on the YouTube version of this, there's a lot of footage I used from several different YouTubers. So always want to shout out my sources to so folks can fact check me if I got something wrong, or read more about it themselves. Either way, it kind of gives you more stuff to look for, and it's PLATO is what you're going to want to search for, and kind of if you need like a more assistance, like 1960, like search something like that, and some stuff should pop up. But that'll do it for this episode of Memory Card, and this feels good to get back into doing this, and hopefully this kind of new system that I have going will work out, and I can get going, because I did look into what future stuff I want to cover in future episodes, and I'm quite excited because pretty recently, I think after computers, or after I think it's Galaxy Game, which is the episode after Computer Space, we're going to cover the beginnings of Atari. So Atari's going to enter the scene, and I'm so excited to cover about that because I have so much love for Atari. But first, we got to get caught up on the podcast, and then we got to do the Galaxy Game episode and video. So that will all come soon. Keep an eye out. I would say I am back, and hopefully I have a good system going that allows me to not go away for so long again. So that'll do it. And check me out on my YouTube, Gamma Galaxian, and my Twitch and all that stuff. I do plan to live stream and all that stuff again. So feel free to give me some love if you want. And if a Patreon is something that would be interesting, especially for like special episodes and maybe some game reviews or something like that I could do, or like, I don't know. I have some ideas, some interesting stuff maybe. So if that's something interesting, let me know. Let me know if you'd be interested in that. So anyway, that'll do it. See ya.